Hey, real quick, this isn't paid, but The Velocipaster 2 is currently on Kickstarter. The Velocipaster is one of my favorite movies I've ever covered on this channel. I've grown to be very good friends with the original director who is still involved in this project, and I would love to see it get funded, so I'll have the link down below. So we are wearing a movie shirt because at some point we'll be discussing someone a little, who's part of the Kevin Smith universe. So today we are talking about Barbarian, a horror movie that had serious legs. It stayed in theaters for so long, even in tiny theaters, and I thought that was incredibly well deserved. I think it's one of the best horror movies of the year, and while it does have a couple issues and some unanswered questions that I guess really don't matter at the end of the day, and I actually wish it had ended differently, I still had a blast, and I'm here to share it with you. 'Tis the season, after all. So Barbarian was a really fun one. It was written and directed by Cregger, who you may recognize from Whitest Kids You Know. I love that his background is so strongly in comedy, so we get a lot of that infused into this horror, and I think that it's still great at genuinely building tension. Honestly, a lot of the times having good comedy in a horror makes those tense moments hit all the harder when you feel like you've been lulled down into a sense of security. It also has a super interesting narrative structure, which we will obviously get into, but it's something that actually almost prevented this movie from being made because studios just didn't get it. But to me, and a lot of other people that clearly love this movie, that narrative structure is part of what makes this so cool, and overall just elevates the movie. There's so much going on with segments of this movie that I happily would have taken more from certain aspects, but it also doesn't leave you feeling high and dry or fully wondering what the hell just happened. It does a really good job juggling social norms and how people may behave not to be rude, and how those conventions can change over time. How people who are very clearly in the wrong will just play different mental gymnastics to absolve themselves of any kind of wrongdoing and guilt, and we're talking about morality here. People that are claiming to be good, but then they're actually garbage. But first and foremost, it is just genuinely a solid and entertaining horror movie. It's fun, terrifying, and disturbing. It'll use jump scares in a really effective way without ever really relying on them, and then infuses that comedy in such a great way. It'll just keep you alert the entire time. But you know what else will keep you alert? Today's sponsor, Cometeer. Cometeer is a new format of coffee that's flash frozen to lock in freshness and deliciousness. Every month you get a shipment delivered right to your door, customized to your roast preference from light, medium, dark, and even decaf. Just keep the recyclable capsules in your freezer and pull one out to melt in a beverage of your choice anytime you're looking for a fresh cup. Now, it was all about the ice drinks, but we're moving into the fall season. It's getting a little bit chilly, so I'm switching it up with a nice warm beverage today. I'm keeping it classic as a coffee by adding about 8 ounces of water to their mocha java blend and a bit of milk and sugar. Okay, this is my first time trying this particular flavor, and oh my god. But you can easily make something like a latte by mixing in steamed milk instead of water. And that versatility is one of my favorite things about Cometeer. I have so many different devices for making coffee, and they're either way too time consuming, and the ones that aren't just taste bitter and watery. But Cometeer has so many different blend options that it makes it easy to switch up what I'm looking for daily from the beverage type to temperature, and it always tastes bold and delicious. So if you're interested in trying the deliciousness of Cometeer out for yourself, you can save $40 off your first 2 orders by using code Amanda at the link down below, or heading over to cometeer.com for a limited time. So to no spoilers, start with the premise. It's a pretty fun one. The trailer set this up perfectly on so many levels, and maybe even showed a little bit too much, but that setup gives you so many different options as to what could be going on here. A woman shows up to an Airbnb only to find that someone else is already there, and he is just as confused about the whole thing as she is. She's obviously concerned that something really weird is going on here, that maybe he's lying, squatting, maybe this was planned, but it seems like a genuine mistake. She booked Airbnb, he booked HomeAway, an error of the modern real estate minefield. And at this point, it seems like it's too late to get a hold of anybody because this is a managed property. But Tess is still tense and hesitant. I think they did a really good job casting Bill Skarsgard because, he's a fine-looking fellow, but based on some of his past roles and the fact that he can come across looking really creepy and kind of cold, there's kind of already that preconceived notion that something could be going on with this guy. But even without that, we understand her hesitance. Even if this entire mix-up, that doesn't mean that Keith isn't a weirdo that might try something or push some boundaries, even if he is saying all the right things.
I thought I'm gonna have some of this here wine, but if I open it while you weren't here that I thought you wouldn't want any if you didn't see me open it.
He does eventually invite her in while she's looking for a hotel because he points out that the neighborhood is really not safe. You just can't quite tell at night. But the lack of activity is immediately obvious. But after the first hotel is completely booked, Keith remembers that there's some kind of medical convention in town and she probably won't have any luck. So this is probably true, but he could also be lying or exaggerating to get her to stick around because he wants to spend some more time with her. But mostly he just seems to be trying to make her comfortable. He makes her tea, even though she said she doesn't want any. He insists that she take the bedroom. And she stays pretty distant from him for most of the night until it's revealed that he's a founding member of this art collective known as the Lion Tamers, and she's conveniently in town interviewing for a job on a movie that would be looking around at a lot of these different Detroit art communities that have kind of spread out into the more abandoned areas of towns and kind of like reviving them as communities. While this is the only place she could find to book, he's scoping out the area as a potential new space. So now they're hitting it off great. She's loosened up. She agreed to have some wine. He shares pro skills on how to properly apply a duvet cover. But he definitely has a moment here where he lingers and things all like maybe he can hang out or like maybe like there's a little bit more going on here, but he doesn't ask, push. He just leaves when she's clearly not down. However, this is the only time she shuts a door where she doesn't instantly lock it behind her. The movie makes a big point of showing her locking the doors anytime she shuts one. But she didn't this time and wakes up to the sound of the door slowly creaking open and then this weird sound. Now, it's the noise that really wakes her up to make her notice that the door was open, and she kind of assumed it had to be Keith, but she can immediately hear him having some kind of nightmare on the couch. So she heads to wake him up and kind of ask about what's going on, and you see the basement door just pulls shut behind her, so something's in the basement. But nothing else happens. She heads to her interview, and that's when she fully realizes how truly abandoned this street is, and it goes on for ages. So this is just a single super well-maintained house in the middle of this completely overgrown and abandoned neighborhood, which is honestly more uncomfortable than like a shitty house in the middle of a completely overgrown and abandoned neighborhood. She crushes the interview, but that's not really the important part here. The important part is the director's reaction when she says where she's staying. And it's an immediate reaction of like, I don't even understand how it's possible that you're staying in an Airbnb in this area that is not safe. You really shouldn't be there. Then she has the next immediate nope the fuck out moment when she gets back and some man is just running at her full tilt in the street.
Hey! Hey, little girl! Come out that house! Go away!
That's 100% when I would have bailed on this situation. She calls 911 and they say that there's literally no one available to dispatch, so no one's coming to help. So she does the last thing that anyone should do in a horror movie, because obviously she realizes she's in a horror movie, and she goes into the basement to find more toilet paper. You know what, ma'am? You're home alone. There's a shower right there. I'm so sorry. I would probably go in the basement, but it's fine. And of course, the doors swing shut when she gets down there, and like the window won't open. Her phone's upstairs, and she has the keys, so Keith won't even be able to get back in when he gets home. So now you're just kind of like, is it an old house? Does the door close by itself, or is it ghosts? So she immediately starts looking around for something that can help her get out when she finds a rope in the wall and just does the dumbest thing and pulls it. Like you're currently alone. Some dude just ran at you full tilt in the street. Just mind your business. But no, she pulls it and it opens up to a secret room.
Nope.
Thank God she did at least one smart thing. But eventually her curiosity gets the best of her because she didn't immediately try to find a way to shut that door, which I would have done so damn fast. But she uses a mirror to reflect the light to scope it out before wandering in. Innovative, but dumb as fuck. And what she finds is actually horrifying. We've got a dirty, bloody bed in a room with harsh lighting, a shit bucket, a bloody handprint on the wall, and a camera. And she wanders in. Ma'am, you already got locked in the basement. You don't need to get locked in the torture porn room too. And you know what? It's all of this logic I put out there is exactly the reason why if I was in a horror movie scenario, I would probably die first. Thankfully, she leaves right when Keith's getting back. He manages to open the window and get the key so we can lock the door. So she obviously immediately wants to bail, but Keith thinks she might be kind of like panicking for no real reason and wants to check it out for himself and convinces her to stay so that he doesn't also accidentally get locked in the basement.
I'm sorry if I don't seem like I'm taking whatever it is that you saw seriously. I didn't see it.
But this dumbass goes further. It kind of seemed obvious that one of those walls looked like it also could have been a door, and apparently it was. And this dumbass just had to wander and get himself stuck in a cavern.
Help! Come up here, Keith!
And apparently Tess is a significantly better person than me and goes down to help him. We see some weird cages, a trail of blood before finally bumping into Keith, who's apparently been bit before this thing comes running at them from the dark and bashes his head into the cement. Immediately my thoughts were going to things like Wendigos. I don't know if you've seen like Until Dawn, but that's kind of the vibe I got from this thing. Like, I don't know, but whatever. It then just hard cuts to Justin Long singing in a sports car.
And the organizations ain't really organized.
See, friend of the channel, and he's not a friend of the channel. He's a friend of Kevin Smith. But I talked about Tusk, so I think that makes us homies. He just doesn't know. What a hard switch in character reveal that was. I love it. And that is something that so many different studios and producers were just like, not into, but that's so good. They could be like, you can't just introduce a new character like 50 minutes into the movie. Yes, you can. So now you're just kind of wondering, does he have something to do with it? Was he like a previous victim who we're cutting back to? Is he gonna be a future victim? What I do know is that Justin Long is fantastic, and the energy he brings to horror movies is just... If you haven't watched my Tusk video, I strongly recommend. So apparently he's an actor, and he's just finding out that one of his co-stars had made some pretty harsh accusations of assault against him, and he's probably gonna get kicked off the show entirely, which is very shocking to him.
What's she saying I did? Is she saying I her or something?
Yes.
And because of how serious the allegations are, there's going to be a huge story about it running the next day, and it could become a criminal matter. So he's shocked, thinks the whole thing is bullshit, thinks he has the defamation lawsuit in the bag, but he's got to try to figure out how to maximize his finances because he's probably not going to get much work going forward, which is when we find out that he has Michigan properties. So now it's coming together. He owns this house. And not only does he have no idea what's going on in this weird sub-basement, he also has no idea that it was even being rented out at the time. Even the person renting the property doesn't realize it's been booked, but it was double booked. That's like a little weird. I get that a lot of stuff is automated, but sure. So instead of waiting for whoever's there to come back or looking to see where they might be, he heads out partying with a friend. This also happens to be the director, fun fact, but he very blatantly reveals that he's guilty but doesn't think he is.
She just took some convincing is all.
Did she say no?
I mean,
like, no, stop?
At first.
Literally saying that she said no, like quite a bit at first, but he just kept fooling around with her until it happened. Literally just chalks up the entire event to his persistence. Icky, just take the no, boys and girls. But that's really the purpose of this side of the story. Act 1 is a woman being hyper-vigilant about whether or not she can trust this man in front of her, and Act 2 flips it where we're following someone who is what she's afraid of but refuses to accept or take ownership of his own actions. The kind of person that literally thinks if you don't jump out of the bushes and yell, "Oh, I'm gonna R-word you," like you can't be guilty of that crime. The stuff he says is just like shitty dude gold, man. He like drunk calls her and says that he's not even mad at her.
Really, really sorry. I did anything that night that might have like offended you. People can have different versions of the same thing.
The next day he finally thinks to check the basement after no one's come back and someone had the door propped open the night before. And here's a slamming noise.
Hello?
And like Tess, he finds that secret room, which he was clearly unaware of, and immediately abandons all concerns as to who might be down here or what might be going on when he finds that room because...
Can underground rooms be listed? Square footage?
He wants to know if he can list it with the house sale.
Oh, hell yeah. Oh, gross.
This man. And then he also notices the other secret entrance, and you gotta think, okay, now he's gonna freak out. There's this creepy dungeon, something's gotta give.
Oh, shit. Okay.
I fucking lost it, man. That's one of the funniest things I've seen in a movie all year, that's just a tape measure. Like, we're getting so much peak tension of knowing something's down there, and this man is just getting his measurements, so it's like so funny, but then you're obviously like, how much leeway is he gonna get here? But then he stumbles onto a really weird room that has an old CRT TV playing some kind of video for new mothers. There's a bunch of blankets, it clearly smells, but then something starts to pull on the measuring tape. So he starts running, and we get these creepy flashes flashes of that lady running at him in the dark before he falls into this great trap where thankfully Tess is still alive. And then we get another hard cut to this neighborhood right when Reagan took over, which I think is like kind of when like the trickle down Reagan economics or Reaganomics were starting. But we're specifically shown in the movie that some of the neighbors are already planning to leave because they see the writing on the wall for the location, even though it like currently looks so perfect and idyllic. It looks like it's out of a magazine.
Neighborhood's going to hell, Frank.
But it is very clear that this man, Frank, is a creep. It starts with him shopping for home birth materials because he has a woman trapped in his basement and he's very clearly gotten her pregnant. And it's not a one and done because after he picks up the supplies, we see him prepping another victim, saying he works for an electrical company so that he can come in and unlock a window for later access. So my guess is that this is something he's done pretty regularly over the years and then started having like offspring with the offspring until we get this lovely lady. I feel like I'm gonna have a hard time showing so many clips with her on screen because she's just naked. And it's just titty city, man. Like, we'll do what we can. Which is when it cuts back to the present and we find out that she essentially just wants to be a mom and sees these people she's nabbing as her babies. Ew, ew, ew. Oh my God, no. Bash my head into a wall. I am not touching that with my mouth. Now, even just with the knowledge we have here, she is not a traditional villain. She's technically the character that's been dealt the worst hand and just wants to care for people. She just can't. I'm not saying that means people have to just like sit around and take being nursed for eternity and that you can't take proactive actions against this person. I'm going to puke. I'm just saying it's a tragic story. All she's had in this dungeon is this weird motherly video and then presumably a lot of abuse she would have faced at the hands of her father. So she just has those two extremes of like anger and nurturing. Because she doesn't even get sad at Mr. Lonh for not immediately going along with it. Just thinks he's a fussy eater and brings him to the nursery. Okay, that boop is simultaneously hilarious and horrific. This is cinema. But Tess manages to use this as her chance to escape. She busts out the window and that guy that had been running at her earlier pulls her out just in time. And apparently he just knows everything that's going on in there. I think that was maybe he had a little bit too much knowledge, but fine.
And she ain't even the worst thing that's in there.
Ah, the old creeper's still down there. But sir, I just want to say that yelling,
"Come here! Hey, little girl! Come out that house!"
probably was not the best way to get her to leave. But it's fine, because he specifically lets her know that if she doesn't leave the area by nightfall, the mother, as she's deemed, will come out looking for her. Which is interesting to me, because it's like very clear that she was the one who like opened the door and made that weird noise that first night. But so like, why didn't she like nab any of them then if she was kind of like looking for someone new to nurture? Because she's clearly hasn't had anybody for a bit. I would say that maybe that's one of the bigger plot issues that, again, at the end of the day, doesn't really matter. But Tessa's hellbent on getting back down there to help AJ. So she kind of like wanders until she finds a gas station and tries to get police help. But they just won't. They take one look at her, assume she's a drug addict. She eventually manages to get them to go back with her, but then they like won't enter the house. They really don't believe what she's saying. And then they threaten to lock her up because they just 100% don't believe her and immediately end up leaving to go help in another situation. Absolutely shitty scenario, so rage-inducing. But back with AJ, he stumbles on Daddy Dearest, who the mother is clearly terrified of because she immediately stops advancing on him when he gets close to the door. So at first, AJ rightfully assumes that Frank's also a victim and that he's just too old to leave, but very quickly realizes he's the cause of all this. He has a bunch of tapes of all the people he's taken over the years. Sometimes he knows their names and sometimes he just uses descriptions like wouldn't stop crying. Oh my God.
What is wrong with you?
Now, the second that AJ started talking about how he was going to get the cops there and she was going to pay for what she did and they were going to get saved, he got antsy and then he ended up grabbing a gun and shooting himself. Not that it seems like they could have brought this man to prison. He seems like pretty nonverbal right now. He seems very old and sick. He probably just would have been locked in some kind of like hospital pretty cozy in a hospital for the rest of his life. And if you're worried that this movie may be leading you down a path to kind of suggest that like, see, what AJ did wasn't that bad. Absolutely not. If anything, this movie is stressing that you don't don't have to get to the point that you're the guy locking people in a basement to be the bad guy. Now, in terms of how he even owns this house without knowing any of this happened, I assume at some point Frank moved into the tunnels when he just couldn't keep up with the upkeep of the house anymore. It probably went into foreclosure, which is when AJ would have bought it. I really don't understand how somebody wouldn't have caught the room downstairs, but you know what? We're not gonna nitpick. It doesn't really matter that much. It's not a super egregious thing to get hung up on. It's a horror movie. We're having a good time. But it cuts back to Tess breaking in so she can get her keys. And as she starts to drive, the mother comes bursting through the door, so she hits her with the car, which obviously just breaks her vehicle. But hey, she seems dead. Maybe. Which is when the most obvious disaster happens. Tess goes down to save AJ while he's making his way out with the gun, and he shoots her, assuming that it's the mother. Thankfully though, not dead. They just hobble out, his keys are down in the dungeon, and once they realize that she doesn't seem to be dead on the car anymore, they start walking up the street to find the water tower that the guy that helped her mentioned. And he confirms what I gathered. The mother is just a copy of a copy of a copy, blended in with neglect, no one taking the time to teach her language, and keeping her deprived from sunlight and all just other human communication.
What the fuck is she?
She's just a crazy lady living in that house.
I don't know how this man specifically knows so much about the situation, but that's fine. AJ is now having some huge moral awakening. He's gonna get her help.
I hurt somebody? That matters. I don't know if I'm a bad person, or maybe I'm a good person who just did a bad thing. I can't change what I've done. I can just try and fix it.
So it seems like he's trying to have some self-reflection and make some changes. But before we can dwell there, the mother immediately crashes the party. Rip this poor man who only tried to help. And of course, all that I'm a changed man who needs to fix their mistakes goes right out the window. He's just running full tilt ahead of her, drops the gun, and decides he has to use her as leverage to get away.
Hey! Come get your baby!
And I can't show it because it's literally just titties flying at the screen, but the mother, because she genuinely just wants to nurture and protect these people, dives off the tower to break Tess's fall. There's just so many scenes in this that are equal parts comical and horrific. But again, Tess manages to survive, and he is right back to the like, hey, it's okay, I can save you.
I had no choice, you know? She was gonna kill us both.
And then he tries to say that like he didn't let her go, she slipped. And this is kind of where I can't decide how I feel about the conclusion. I just really wanted to see this man get drugged through the coals. I think in my ideal world, the mother would have been dead at this point and he would have thought that Tess was dead. And then while he's giving some harrowing story to the news about how he tried to save her, about how he survived, to try to like flip the public narrative on him, the news outlets would start getting reports that Tess had wandered into a hospital or something and then kind of like told her side really quickly, and the narrative would have just all started flipping in real time. Just something to that effect where he tries to again play himself up as the hero. But what actually happens is that the mother isn't dead. She ends up brutally murdering him for hurting her baby, which I can understand being a really cathartic scene for some, but I just wanted a bit more out of this ending. I do like that on top of them having this kind of like flip story in the acts, they end up presented with the same scenarios of like wandering into the basement, having the door shut behind them, wandering into this secret room, wandering down into this like sub-dungeon. Both end up getting trapped, but then it's like the reactions that are so different. It's kind of like the moral look at what they do. So like Tess makes the, while it's sometimes not great for self-preservation choices, they are like the more moral choices, whereas AJ wants to think that he's like the moral good guy, but time and time again, he's gonna throw everyone under the bus, or like quite literally specifically off the ledge to save himself. So what happens next is the mother is trying to be very tender to Tess. She very much wants to bring her back to the house, but Tess is like, I'm shot. You can't move me. This can't happen. And she doesn't really understand what's going on, but Tess is just kind of put into the position that she has to shoot her. And then it just hard cuts to the credits. We get a couple of shots showing Tess wandering through the streets, let us know that like she's alive, but I was really just hoping that it would at least cut to some kind of news story about AJ fucked up again. I don't know why, I just really wanted that public reaction. I just really wanted the public just acknowledgement of everything that had been going on here, or at least just one other thing to close it out, even if it's just Tess saying something or having some kind of like fuck you moment at the end. But hey, she survived. Overall, it is a super fun, tense, and unique horror experience, and I'm still so glad to have watched it, and I had a lot of fun watching it again while making this video. Though the people who sat in front of me for this movie, hated it. Instantly started bitching at the one who chose to watch it, so if you hated it, just know that you're not alone. I just personally think that the movie did enough throughout the runtime to make up for what I feel was a weak ending, but I'm sure a lot of people disagree. I'm sure a lot of people really liked how kind of hard cut that ending was and thought it would just kind of like really added to it. I'm sure a lot of people really liked how they kind of took care of Justin Long's story at the end. I just had this perfect image of how that would have fallen out. I, for some reason, just really wanted it to come full circle with like the public narrative that he has for himself as a celebrity, but that is gonna do it for today's video. Let me know what you guys are thinking in the comment section down below. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Is there another horror movie from around this time that's come out that you preferred? Thanks so much to my Patreon and YouTube channel members. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Leave a like on the video if you're into that kind of thing. All my social medias will be linked down below. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. I'm mostly okay, and we'll catch you all later. Also, I didn't mention that like this house is on Barbary Street, so like Barbarian, I thought it was fun. Be my little baby.